This meeting is the February 4th Technical Advisory Committee meeting for the Met Council. And we're going to jump into the agenda here. I appreciate everyone joining us today virtually. First order of business, approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any recommended changes or any of that? Okay, not seeing any hands come up or comments. We'll consider that approved without vote. Next, we'll move into approval of the January 7th Technical Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Does anyone have any comments, recommended changes, or I'd entertain a motion?
Lisa will make a motion.
Thanks, Lisa. We have a first. Do we have a second?
Second. Molly.
Okay, I heard Molly first. Thanks, Chad. So we got a first and a second. Any further discussion? Otherwise, all in favor signify by saying aye by roll call. Mr. Barbeau.
Thank you, Chair. Anoka County, McPherson.
Aye.
Carver County, Robgent.
Aye.
Dakota County, Library.
Aye.
Hennepin County, Ellis.
Aye.
Ramsey County, Rogers.
Aye.
Scott County, Jessen. Or Jensen. Washington County, Leitner.
Aye.
7W, Hausman. Egan, Mathis.
Aye.
Eden Prairie, Ellis.
Aye.
Fairleigh, Lucher.
Aye.
Chanhassen, Howley.
Aye.
Brooklyn Park, Culver. Wakefield, Omi.
Aye.
Woodbury, Hartsel. Plymouth, Thompson.
Aye.
Minneapolis Engineering, Hager.
Aye.
Minneapolis Planning, Mail.
Aye.
St. Paul Engineering, Nick Peterson.
Aye.
St. Paul Planning, Collins. Metro Transit, on.
Adam Harrington sitting in for Jonathan this meeting and the next one as he's on parental leave.
You and let's see, Suburban Transit, Fighton.
Aye.
DNR, Spooner Walsh.
I'm going to abstain. I wasn't there.
Bicycle, Sabota. Told me he'd be out. Pedestrian, Turner Bargain.
Aye.
Deed, Eddie.
Abstain. I wasn't in attendance.
Mac, Reef.
Yep, I'm abstaining too.
Council, Community Development, Boylan. INDOT Freight, Tori Hunkus. Are you here?
Yes, abstain. I was not at the last meeting.
Welcome, Tori. She's our new member replacing Shelley Meyer, who retired. McCartney, MnDOT McCartney.
Aye.
MPCA Dickerson.
Aye.
And
Aye.
Council Peterson. Steve Peterson. Steve. And tab coordinator Kotsukos. For that,
Aye.
Steve. Chair, that is an easy quorum, 22 ayes and 4 abstentions.
All right, thank you. That item is approved. All right. Next on the agenda here, we've got public comment. Is anyone on the call this morning that would like to address the TAC or have any public comments? I'll ask again, are there any members of the public that have joined us this morning and want to address the TAC?
Chair, staff was not informed of such.
Thanks, Joe. All right, not seeing any hands come up or anyone making any comments, we'll move forward. Next, we'll turn it over to Elaine for the TAB report.
Thank you, Chair. TAB met on January 21st. For the Chair's report, Hovland reported that TAB will have an action on the frequency of reading the Dakota Acknowledgment at its February TAB meeting. Hovland will be attending the U.S. Conference of Mayors next week. This was after the TAB meeting, and we report back next month. Hovland welcomed new TAB member Tim Marino as a TAB representative for transit. Other appointments include Anoka County alternate John Heinrich, alternate for Scott County Jody Brennan, and Citizen B alternate Aaron Cameron, and non-motorized alternate Jackson Hampton. The Minneapolis representative alternate are still in process of appointment. Also, the second tab transit member and alternates, and the Metropolitan Airports Commission member too. And then the regional solicitation policymaker work group met prior to tab. For the MnDOT report, Sheila Calpry reported on the safety updates for all transit fatalities in Minnesota. At the end of December 2025, there had been 370 fatalities statewide, and that was up from 319 at the end of November. In 2024, there were 477 fatalities. And for 2025, the metro area had a little less than 40% of all statewide traffic fatalities, but had 70% of statewide pedestrian traffic fatalities. There were awards for the released for Corridors of Commerce, Transportation Economic Development, and the Minnesota Highway Freight Program. And being that it's pothole season, MnDOT is working with industry to request early opening of asphalt plant to start working on the pothole repair. For MPCA, Amanda Smith reported that MPCA continues to interact with federal level and some deregulatory efforts that they're going through, including related to transportation and impacts of that impact emissions from transportation. And they are accepting comments on rolling back CAFE standards, which are the standards that regulate the vehicle efficiency. There are 2 grant opportunities open: the Climate Smart Food Systems Grant, a $5 million grant opportunity for vehicle replacements for businesses as well as government entities whose vehicles need to be somehow connected to the food system, and a smaller grant for $135,000 in grants for electric bikes for commercial use. For the Metropolitan Airports Commission report, Bridget Reef reported that MAC has a new chairperson, James Lawrence, and then starting February 1st, TSA is going to require real ID or passport, and if you don't have one, there will be a cost of $45 every single time. 90% of passengers have some sort of real ID. And then TSA is also implementing a touchless ID that passengers can opt in. And currently it's for pre-check and includes facial recognition, and you won't need a boarding pass or ID to go through security checkpoints. And additional information on the federal actions can be found on their metroairports.org website. For the Metropolitan Council, Deb Barber reported that Met Council will hear an update on 2 topics. Metro Transit is completing its evaluation of candidate arterial BRT corridors and will recommend 2 lines, and that's actually on our info item today. And there will be a study of 3 additional lines that will inform a future recommendation for the Metro L line. Additionally, 2 study corridors will be evaluated as potential extensions of operating Metro C line. And the council will review a fair policy update. And a new transit service pilot is launching in February to bring app-based on-demand transit link service to parts of Forest Lake, Stillwater, Oakport Heights, and Hastings. And the Suburban Transit Association, Gary Hansen, sent in a report. And in summary, suburban transit providers are all reported growth in 2025. Some highlights: Southwest Transit reported the autonomous vehicle ridership within the transit station zone increased 144%. And based on the success, Prime on-demand ridership is serving more compact zones, and Southwest will consider modeling regular route bus service in smaller zones to improve efficiency. And Minnesota Valley Transit Authority's Connect microtransit ridership was up 34%. And in 2025, their eJust microbuses saved MVTA more than $24,000 in fuel costs and reduced CO2 emissions by 97 tons. For business items, TAB approved 2 streamlined tip amendments that came through TAC, 3 project adjustments, and the Minnesota Safe Streets for All project. There was an election of TAB Executive Committee members for 2026. Members include for the county, Julie Jepson of Anoka County and Mai Chang Zhang from Ramsey County. From the city, first class, Sarah Just, with Molly Coleman, the alternate, being most likely the one serving. From the remaining cities, Taylor Hubbard Chaska and Victor Lake Prior Lake. For the citizen board members, Peter Ducan, and the non-motorized representative, Brian Martinson. And then they approved all the items for the regional solicitation. They approved the qualifying requirements for both the solicitation, regional solicitation and the active transportation. They approved having no local match for the local bicycle, local pedestrian active planning, active transportation planning categories. They approved the scoring guidance and measures and approved the recommendation for the weighting for the community considerations of 15% for the safety category, the lower, and then asked for specific comments during the public comment period from the public on the weighting. See, they approved release of both packets for the solicitation and active transportation for public comment, and then also approved the Highway Safety Improvement Program solicitation for release for public comment. And then prior to this meeting, Joe McPherson had mentioned to me that several TAC members had asked to receive the TAB summary report when I send it out to TAB members. So I will email this out after this meeting and then I'll add the TAC members to future emails. And for the committees that I am reporting a summary, this is a summary of the summary report, my notes. So the actual report is longer, so you will get the full report then. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Elaine. Yeah, that was a busy meeting and appreciate you adding the TAC members to that email. Any questions for Elaine? Okay, not seeing any, we'll move on. Thanks, Elaine. Into the committee reports and business, the TAC Executive Committee did meet this morning at 8:30 to review the items that are on the agenda this morning and talk about some other items. A few of those items are for March. As of right now, just mark your calendars. We're going to meet virtually unless Bethany receives a ton of comments on the regional solicitation measures and qualifying criteria and all the other action items that were released for public comment. In that case, if the team here feels that we need to meet in person to have a more detailed conversation, we'll do so. But again, as of right now, that'll be a virtual meeting in March. And then second, Steve Peterson and the regional solicitation project crew had mentioned that, you know, with all of those details being released for public comment, if your teams are getting antsy and they want a lot of work to do as we approach spring break, if you're interested in starting to gear up and start prepping for your applications, now's a good time to do so. Steve, I'll turn it over to you if you want to add any additional commentary there or if anyone has any questions.
Mr. Chair, we're tentatively looking at something of doing the call for projects the second half of April, due as soon as the first 2 weeks of June. But I put a link in the chat with PDFs of the application, which are probably 99% of the way there. So you can't do it in the online software yet, but you can download all the PDFs and do it in Word or what have you. Start thinking about your responses. So thought I'd offer that, so there's not a big rush at the end here to try and get things in. People should know that, you know, we're pretty close to being there, and good time to start thinking about what you may apply for.
Thank you, Steve. And just another call out here too, and maybe Bethany can add a little bit of detail to it. So the platform that we'll be using to apply this time is new. It's a new software program. So I'm not sure what the details are with that for having username and passwords, but Bethany, can you give us a quick update on how that process is coming along and what people can expect when it comes time to actually hit the button to apply?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The council is transitioning over to Flux as a grant platform. We are preparing some communications for everyone to get their information uploaded into the platform before, thank you, Joe, before the application period opens in mid to late April. So look for a Gov delivery coming likely late this month for more information on how to get prepared for the opening of the application.
All right, thanks, Bethany. I appreciate that. And that's pretty much all we discussed at the executive committee. Any questions on those items? Okay, not seeing any. We'll jump into our action items here. So we've got 2 streamlined tip amendments. This first one here is a NEVI project, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Barbeau to walk us through this item.
Thank you, Chair. You might remember a couple of years ago, we had some NEVI projects on the tip. That's the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program. And so what happened is that in the 2025 tip, we programmed a lot of NEVI, or a handful of NEVI projects in there, and we have some funding that has yet to be spent. In order for MnDOT to do so, we have to put it back into the tip. So this one is has a specific site to put this station in, exit 251 and I-94 in Lake Elmo. The crossed out numbers are really what it looked like in the tip a couple of years ago, or last year, I guess. And so it's not in the tip now, so that cross out number might not have been the actual way to approach this. But MnDOT is requesting to allow them to spend the NEVI funding and to do so through the tip. That's all I have. Is there any questions?
Okay, pretty simple tip amendment here. Are there any questions or I'd entertain a motion?
So move. Kislucher.
Thank you, Jim. We have a first. Do we have a second?
Second, Hartzell.
Thanks, Hartzell. Appreciate that. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, not seeing any. All in favor signify by saying aye by roll call. Mr. Barbeau?
Thanks, Chair. McPherson.
Aye.
Robjan.
Aye.
Labrie.
Aye.
Ellos.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Scott County here. Jessen.
I am here. Aye.
Leitner.
Aye.
7W. Hausman or Witter. Mathis.
Aye.
Ellis.
Aye.
Lucher.
Aye.
Howley.
Aye.
Culver from Brooklyn Park, you here? Hartzell.
Aye.
Omi.
Aye.
Michael Thompson, Plymouth.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Mayo.
Aye.
Dick Peterson.
Aye.
St. Paul Planning, Collins. Harrington.
Aye.
Whiten.
Aye.
Spooner Walsh.
Aye.
Sabota. I think he's not here. Sorry. Turner Bargan.
Aye.
Eddie.
Aye.
Reef.
Aye.
Community Development, Patrick Boylan. Hunkus.
Aye.
McCartney.
Aye.
Dickerson.
Aye.
Steve Peterson.
Aye.
And Kotsukos.
Aye.
Sure, that's 28 ayes.
All right, that item passes. Next, we'll move on to the next streamlined tip amendment with Highway 77, and I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Barbeau.
Thanks again, Chair. This is another MnDOT request to make a small change to their their Minnesota 77 bridge project. You see a number of bridges being rehabbed on this project, and they want to add TMS and lighting. And that comes with it a small project cost change. Actually, that project cost change is not big enough to warrant a tip amendment, but it's part of what's happening. So pretty simple change with federal funds that are programmed by MnDOT as opposed to the resuscitation. And here is where it's located. That's all I got. Stand for questions.
All right, pretty simple one again. Thank you. Any questions for Joe? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion on this item.
Mr. Chair, this is Paul. I'll move approval.
Thank you, Paul. We have a first. Do we have a second?
Second,
Melissa will
Mathis.
second.
I heard Mathis first there. So we got a first and a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor signify by saying aye by roll call. Mr. Barbeau?
McPherson,
Aye.
Robgent,
Aye.
Labrie,
Aye.
Ellos,
Aye.
Rogers,
Aye.
Jessen,
Aye.
Leitner. Leitner,
Aye.
Mathis,
Aye.
Ellis,
Aye.
Lucher,
Aye.
Howley,
Aye.
Hartzell,
Aye.
Homey,
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Oops, I missed Thompson,
Aye.
Mayell,
Aye.
Nick Peterson,
Aye.
Collins, St. Paul, Harrington,
Aye.
Fighton,
Aye.
Spooner Walsh,
Aye.
Turner Bargan,
Aye.
Eddie,
Aye.
Reef,
Aye.
What is an
Okay.
MS number? Like,
Hunkus,
Aye.
McCartney,
Aye.
Dickerson,
Aye.
Steve Peterson,
Aye.
and Kotsukos.
Aye.
Chair, same margin, 28-0.
All right. Thank you, Joe. That item is approved. And that completes our streamlined tip amendment items. Next, we're going to receive an update from Bradley Bobbitt on the TAC Transit Planning Technical Working Group and where they're at with items. Welcome, Bradley.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, everyone. I'm Bradley Bobbitt. I'm a planner with MTS Planning, and I'm the staff for the Transit Planning Technical Working Group. The group met on January 22nd. Joe Barbeau staffed that meeting in my stead since I was actually out for a work trip. But the group had 4 info items. They received an update on the regional solicitation. We also had a presentation from Carver County on a mobility needs study that they are working with Southwest Transit on, looking at transit expansion and service needs in areas of the county that don't currently receive transit service. We also received an update on the Bronze Line project, and then a presentation on development trends along transit. I reviewed the recording. It wasn't a super long meeting, a little bit of discussion, but not a lot to note for this group. I'll also be reaching out to our roster to confirm who our members and alternates are for 2026. And I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Bradley. Do any members have any questions for Bradley on this item? Okay, not seeing any hands pop up. Appreciate the info. Thanks, Bradley. Next, we'll quickly discuss the TAC Planning Committee items. So they didn't meet in January, and Gina is not with us today. But yeah, so they should be meeting here in February, and then we'll have an update here in March. So next, we'll move on to the Funding and Programming Committee, and I'll turn this over to the chair, Jim Klasucher. Welcome, Jim.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and TAC Committee. The funding and programming item, I guess, before you is a scope change request from the City of Minneapolis on the Elliott Park project. The item number is 2026-14. And the Funding and Programming Committee had a pretty lengthy discussion about this scope change, and it really revolved around not necessarily the approval of the scope change, but about what was to be funded. And in I guess a non-unanimous vote, the committee voted to for what's presented here as the third option for funding the program. And I think there the members that there was some concern by the members that voted against it on whether or not this fulfilled the requirements of the scope change policy entirely. So I think Joe can certainly frame a little bit of the discussion here as well. Since that time, I know that staff may want to weigh in, other staff may want to weigh in on this as well.
All right, thank you, Chair. Mr. Barbeau, you want to add any additional information on this or background?
Sure. Thanks, chairs. So this is a drawing of the project that was the project that was applied for and the proposed changes. So the original project there was in the transit category, and it was going to fund transit improvements on the 4 circles that you see. The 2 circles on the left side of the page are being removed from the project, and that is so Hennepin County, well, that is because Hennepin County intends to address that with a later project. It's not necessarily a 1-for-1 copy of what the city was doing, but it is something that the city believes will address the needs. And in order to be responsible with the funds, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do the improvements only to have Hennepin County undo the improvements at some later time when they do their projects. So what their request was to remove that and then to maintain the blue circles, but also, and I would invite the city to say more about what this means. I'll just use their words here. On the blue circles, a refined planning concept for the intersections with further safety improvements developed through further design work. So I'd be happy to hear from them about that. I'm not exactly sure what that entails. And then we have the bike path element here in red as part of the addition. So a little background on our processes. If the city had come to us and said, we want to improve these intersections here, and we want to add this red bike lane to this project and not change anything else, we could actually do that without coming through this process. That would be, provided that the new pieces don't take any federal funds. That would be an administrative process. Nothing here would detract from the project. And so, as Jim kind of alluded to, it wasn't a question of whether they should be able to do this. It's a question of whether federal funds should be able to be spent on this. And so, I think the struggles that were being had at the meeting, at the funding and programming committee meeting, were, can we spend or should we spend federal funds on some of these new pieces? And so, sorry, all right. So the focus of the scope change policy, which we did update in about a year ago, this is only our 3rd scope change request since then. I'm sorry, I'm zipping around here. The focus was, determining whether the federal funds should be awarded. A lot on this paragraph, and while adding, so you can add eligible project elements, which is not a question. The awarded funds from what you're removing shouldn't be shifted away from any other removed elements to new project elements unless the removed elements are being done as part of some other program project. That in itself is a gray area. And then the last sentence, awarded funds can't be added beyond the original award. That actually means you can't provide more funding, which is not a question here and would never actually be a question in this process. So that piece ended up being open to interpretation. And then you would see the question of, whether to tell or whether the city can take all the funding that they wanted so they can spend federal funds on the pink line on the map and the improved intersections, or if they should only spend it on what was originally part of the application, or this is another staff option from prior to funding and programming, allow for the spending of the improvements to the blue dots, but not pink line. It gets a little bit nuanced, a little bit in the weeds, but the scope change policy exists to sort of allow for some flexibility, recognize when things like what's happening in the purple happen, but also to make sure that we're not using the funds just to keep funding for the sake of keeping funding. So that's where we had a split vote. With that, I would stand for questions, and I would certainly invite the city to talk about some of what's going on, particularly at the blue intersections.
All right, thank you, Joe. Before I turn it over to city members, I see we got a few people with their hands up. Before I do that, I just wanted to clarify too, with a little bit of the background here, this was actually a pedestrian facility category application, not a transit application. So just for clarification.
Did I say transit?
You did. That's all right, though. We got your back.
Yes. Thank
No
you.
problem. So
Pretty
Adam, I saw
close.
your hand go up first.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. Question about this project, just so I'm clear on it as I'm reading through this. The original project was to have treatments on Park in Portland, and the request is to move it to 11th. Is that correct?
Chair, not entirely correct. The original was Park in Portland and 11th. And so they're just removing that Park in Portland piece and maintaining the 11th.
Okay,
and
great.
adding 2.
So this just noting that these 2 locations are current bus stops with current bike lanes in them, and so we'd want to make sure we maintain same kind of passage for buses as part of this project if it advances. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Joe. All right, Kathleen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it would be helpful, given that there was a bit of discussion at funding and programming, to just share a little bit about a little more detail than what Joe just shared, if that's all right. Just to give a little more detail. So the elements that are being removed in terms of Park in Portland are due to 2 things. One, Park in Portland was resurfaced in 2024 by the county, new pavement surface, restriping from 3 to 2, bikeway enhancements, and ADA upgrades. And in addition, there's a plan in the county's 10-year work plan, and I think Chad's on the call, he could explain more, but that's basically their 10-year program of plans scheduled for 2035 to reconstruct Park in Portland, this stretch of Park in Portland. So we want to both respect the work that was done and then also the opportunity provided with the reconstruction project to not do additional work there. Some of the near-term safety issues were addressed with the resurfacing. So that is why we are recommending not including those 2 intersections in the project. And then what's happening on 11th is consistent with the grant application. There will be signal improvements, ADA ramps, curb extensions, pedestrian median, and then a protected bikeway. And what we really tried to do here is look at a design that is about, safety for all modes through these intersections, that's aligned with what the grant application was. And this is a high injury street in our Vision Zero action plan as well. As we went through the design process, we did an intersection control evaluation study. We're adding a signal right at 11th and 17th, which is right near that highway exit ramp. The upgrades to the ramps were a little more challenging than expected. So there were some cost increases as well with some of the design elements. And we are definitely, to Adam's point, accommodating that bus stop and the safe passage between and the interaction between the different modes. And then final thing on the 2-way protected bikeway, that was the design treatment that was preferred as we went through the design process. It allows for preserving more on-street parking. And so the intersection improvements at those 2 are being designed to accommodate. Right now there's on-street bikeway painted, and we're doing a behind the curb 2-way bikeway. And then just tying those to the logical points of connection with the network, our All Ages and Abilities network, is where those limits then of that red line was drawn. So that's what we're proposing here, and just wanted to give a little bit more detail on that as kind of the process and the why behind that, and happy to answer any additional questions.
All right, thank you, Kathleen. Quick question for myself here. So when you talk about the project that was done in 2024 with Hennepin County, so were all of the elements that were included in your application for Park in Portland, were those completed with that overlay that the county did, or is there still remaining elements to those intersection improvements that were proposed in the application that are yet to be done?
Chair, great question. And Gustav Stewart, who's our project manager for this project, is on the call as well. Gustav, could you speak to that question, please?
Yeah, happy to answer that. So with the resurfacing in 2024, not all of the elements, such as upgrading the signal to include mast arms, were included that were described in the grant application. That being said, it did address some of the core safety issues and concerns that resulted in the grant application. And with the future planned reconstruction project on Park in Portland that would likely address those issues in the future. So combination of addressing a decent amount of the safety concerns, but also future work planned ahead that would address a greater extent of those as well.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I see Lyndon has his hand up. Go ahead, Lyndon.
Yeah, so question on the red, the trail part. Are you, just to clarify, are you asking for funding for the red part as part of this request?
Gustav,
Kathleen.
can you answer that question related to the option 3, which is the reduction of 489?
Yep, so the option 3 would include the curb protected bikeway features. And the reason that was included in the request was to tie in with the intersection safety improvements that are happening at 11th Avenue and 15th Street and 11th Avenue and 17th Street. Since it, in terms of design, looking at feasibility of tying in, because it's a two-way bike configuration, we're unable to leave those as unprotected bike lanes as it currently exists today.
Any follow-up to that, Lyndon, or does that answer your question?
Yeah, okay, so number 2 is the increased cost of those 2 intersections to incorporate other safety things you need. But 3 is funding for the actual bike way as well. Am I reading that right?
Correct, and it's a
Okay.
concrete curb type of treatment.
Sure.
Yep.
But that's a new project in my mind. I mean, to me, the dropping the 2 intersections, when you applied, you identified a problem with those 2. Those get eliminated. So there should be a reduction in funding, which seems to be the way we're going here. However, you're adding new stuff, which to me doesn't meet the policy. That should be on the city, or they should apply next time. So I would be in support of 2, but not 3, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Lyndon. I see Alyssa has her hand up. Go ahead, Alyssa.
I'm generally where Lyndon is here too, and I think, not that the bikeway is a bad project, but it is a completely different project that was never mentioned in the application. And the application is in the pedestrian category. I just think it sets a really bad precedent for other folks then to be adding. I mean, we understand why this happens. This happens to everybody all the time, that things change on the ground. But for then to open the door for an applicant, and if you scroll up just slightly there, Joe, or whoever's sharing the screen, the piece in italics there at the very top of the page, awarded funds cannot be added to a project beyond the original award as part of a scope change. I mean, the scope change, so add number 2 is okay with me, because to me that those intersections, the scope changed in those intersections, because now you have to design it differently for this bikeway is the way I'm hearing this. But a scope change to add an element that was never part of the project, which is a bikeway all the way up the street, seems to be a different project. And that's where I'm struggling with a little bit going with number 3. And once again, it's because to me it's a slippery slope of, if I came in and said all of a sudden, well, we also want to pave a mile to the east of this project, because the pavement is poor and that was never part of the original scope. I just think it opens the door quite a bit to where the scope changes can go. Understand that the specific intersections have scope change, so that's why I can go forward with item 2 or with number 2, but have concerns about adding the bikeway into it.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa. Kathleen, or members of Minneapolis here, did you guys want to respond to that, or?
Sure, we could, if it would be all right, Chair, we could share an image showing kind of what this design is and why it ties in, and why including, would that be all right if I just pull that up on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Chair, while she's doing that, I want to clarify when it says awarded funds can't be added, that is really saying we can't give you more money, and they're asking for more money. Now, there's other language above that in the policy that is sort of open to some of what Lisa was saying, so that's it. But this used to say federal funds can't be added, which I think was clear, but we changed it to awarded funds because of Act Transportation. So what that sentence says is you can't get more funding through this process. Now, that says there's language above that may play to the point that was being made there.
Okay, so
At the risk of being overly nuanced and in weeds, sorry.
So if you can see here, committee, this is the two major intersections that have the pedestrian improvements. Here on the left side of the screen is 17th, and in the center is 15th, and you can see the different designs incorporating the bus stop here, the bikeway behind the curb, and then connecting the dots between them is a poured in place concrete curb, offering that protection for bicyclists, and then teeing that into a natural network connection. So, I mean, the pieces, right, getting to at least the next intersections are a critical component of that intersection design, and then pulling it forward to where there's a natural connection into the AAA network here at 5th, here on the northeast side, and then to the southwest, right here on 18th, getting across that bridge. So maybe that helps a little bit explain the design here and how that is integrated in, and how leaving no curb in particular between the two intersections would provide some safety risks as we develop this design.
Okay, and so Kathleen, just to clarify, so this design that you're showing on the screen is a little different or substantially different, depending on how you look at it, from what was originally proposed in the application. Is it my understanding that in the original application you were utilizing the existing on-road bike lanes that are there, and then this new one is creating the new, I guess you call it head-to-head bike lane that's protected by the curb? Is that a change?
And Gustav, please correct me if I'm wrong. The application intended to integrate in the bikeway design at these intersections. It was through the design process and our engagement process, incorporate the bi-directional bikeways, each on their lane of traffic, because of the need to maintain on-street parking, and we're able to do a lot more parking if we are able to do a two-way protected. And so we need to then include those safe transition points. So while it wasn't maybe detailed out in that much detail in the application, the intent of this application was to increase traffic safety in this area, which has multimodal users, walkers, bikers, transit riders, car drivers. And so they're all these intersections are on the All Ages and Ability Network. This was a high injury street. And so this is the design that came forward as the preferred design and is compatible with the intent of the application.
Okay, thank you. Steve, you're next up.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Question maybe for Chad from Hennepin County, if he's available. Some of the language in the policy that we wrestled with at Funding and Programming was whether the removed intersections, those two purple dots, were programmed. The policy says programmed as part of another project. And I think some of the commentary at Funding and Programming was, well, it's in Hennepin County's 10-year plan, which I'm not sure what level of programming that is, and just not being familiar with the county's plan. But I just wonder if Chad wouldn't mind just discussing that whether these projects are going to happen, what time frame, what certainty, et cetera. So thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Chad, do you want to respond to that?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve, for the question. So yeah, what's being referred to as the county's 10-year work plan. So try to model that similar to MnDOT's CHIP, that we're looking out beyond our 5-year CIP to 10 years. And that is our priorities to move forward for projects making their way towards our 5-year CIP. That is a plan that we share with our for agency coordination. So we do work with our agencies through those projects to try to choose the year, usually in the next 10 years, to align funding resources. So it is definitely a programming tool. So it depends what your definition of programmed project is. It's not in our approved 5-year CIP though. But what I would say on this one is, we are committed to those projects. Those are typically the projects that we go after as well for regional solicitation, because they are moving forward. They do have needs. And in this case, Park in Portland, we did do a pavement treatment. That's intended to be our last pavement treatment. We introduced some new elements. We took away a lane of traffic. We have a large buffered bikeway. That's kind of what we could do with that project. That was step one. And we will definitely be looking into a protected bikeway along that corridor with the upcoming reconstruction. So currently that's planned for, I think, about 9 years from now.
Okay. Yeah, I read in the letter.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I read in the original application, roughly 2035. So that's the 9 years you're talking about. Okay. The other question, maybe if I can just follow up here, Mr. Chair, quickly, that we heard at Funding and Programming would be the recommendation coming out of FMP was to essentially keep some of that money. But would the Hennepin County potentially apply for a solicitation project? If the money's kind of capped, but could they there's not a rule against it, but would they potentially apply for a solicitation project in the future to that would essentially be kind of double dipping on that money a little bit? No policy against it, but that got brought up to you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know if Chad has any thoughts on that or not, but
yeah, go ahead, Chad.
Chair, thank you. I'll just respond quickly to that. That's out in the future. We'll have to kind of see where things are at. We don't want to, predetermine. That's something we'll have to work through as we work and program and figure out cost participation in the future. So unknown at this time, Steve. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks.
That might be future additional funding being added to a project. Could be interpreted that way.
Yep. All right, Michael, you're up next.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been on this committee for a while, and I was one of the 4 no votes at FMP. And I think the thing that I was trying to wrap my head around was when these items have come up, typically, if there's another project within the next year or two where a removed element is being built as part of another agency's project, I think there's always been some flexibility on that. But I'm just trying to understand the 9 years, because that's a ways out there, obviously. And if there was such a safety benefit, I'm wondering why that isn't being done now and being shifted, because 9 years is quite a stretch. So I guess that's maybe one question for the applicant is, why not do that safety benefit now? Because 9 years is quite a ways out there. And then I guess the other item was it was nuanced. I don't know, Joe, the language there, it says awarded funds cannot be added to a project beyond the original award as part of a scope change. I guess at FMP, how I interpreted that was awarded funds cannot be used for a new element. And so if what I'm hearing from staff is that means added or additional federal funds, well, I guess that would be different than how I interpreted it at FMP. Even if that's the case, I guess my concern is the 9 years, but I'm still open to hear from the applicants more on that. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Any response to that from the proposer or the applicant here or Met Council staff? And I got a lot of hands up, so if you guys just want to speak up, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I think, Gustav, if you have anything else to add, but Gustav spoke earlier to the safety improvements that already happened at Park in Portland. So it addressed a lot of the immediate safety concerns, those improvements in 2024, the restriping from 3 to 2 lanes, and so on. Gustav, anything else you'd want to add to that?
Not particularly. I think within the time frame, it's enough to potentially it would essentially replace all the improvements that could hypothetically be made with this project within several years time frame, risking potential payback of federal funds and other things like that.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up. So what elements would the county be doing as part of the project 9 years from now? Just so I'm clear. Sorry about that.
Yeah, Chad.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Right now it's undetermined. I mean, we still need to work through that, but definitely we would enhance safety improvements. I think the things that maybe got missed with our pavement project that came through was kind of the side streets. So the Minneapolis streets tying into Park and Portland at this location could definitely do some narrowing there to less exposure for the crossings, the pedestrian crossings. Protected bikeway would be the likely outcome. So depending on how that intersection design works, but likely bring the bikeway off street behind the curb through the intersection, then back on street, something like that. So really tightening up the intersection, maybe making it these protected intersections. So definitely that at that time we'll come through the full reconstruction and new vision for this corridor. But we did the best we could with the pavement project and the ADA upgrades that we could at the time.
Thank you, Chad. Any additional follow-up there, Michael?
No, that's all I have for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. And Michael, I think to your point there, it looks like Joel kind of highlighted what you were talking about there in the language. While adding eligible project elements is permitted, awarded funds cannot be shifted away from any removed elements to new project elements. So I think that's what you were getting at there. Thanks for being patient here. I see we have 3 ladies waiting. Next, we have Lissa. Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple things. One, I have to jump off here as soon as I'm done talking. Maddie Dahlheimer I'm tapping her in, so she will now be my replacement. I have to get to mandatory training. But do we have a definition of programmed? I mean, I think the default for all of us is the 5-year CIP means programmed, but is there a definition of that? If there's not, obviously I think Minneapolis is making the case that programmed, it's written down in a Hennepin County plan, but that might be an issue within our documents if we don't have a definition of that. And because I generally agree, the 5-year CIP is what programmed means to me. But it, understand where having an actual plan within Hennepin County, I understand where you're pointing to. I think my bigger issue is the component, the bike component that is north of these intersections. Yes, the tie between the two of them, obviously these intersections are very close together. The work between the two, having that be added, that makes sense. But like extending this well north, understood that it needs to happen as part of a project now that you are further in the design, but that is outside of the scope that was written in this project. And this is not to say it's not a good thing. Minneapolis just needs to fund that outside of with other funding. And like I said, it's establishing a very odd precedent that people can add completely different scope, 4, 5, 6 blocks outside of the original project. And I think that is the problem I have with it, is that I think we are now going to have a waterfall of things. And this project was 4 explicit intersections, and now it is a corridor. And those to me are very different scopes of work. And so that is, once again, the problem and where we're leaning towards number 2. Sorry, Maddie, to tap you in.
Thanks, Lissa. Next up, sake of time here, Jenny, you've been waiting patiently. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to jump in and provide a little clarification, actually to the point Lissa was just making, and maybe explain a little bit more of the city's rationale. So we're making safety improvements at these 2 intersections, and they need to be compatible with the bikeway. That was always part of our application. On the street today are painted bike lanes on each side of the street, so bi-directional bike lanes. Through our engagement and design process, it was identified that that was not the preferred bikeway design into the future, that we wanted to have the bikeway on one side of the road as a two-way protected bicycle facility. That's consistent with our transportation plans and our all ages and abilities bicycle network. In order to do that successfully and provide design continuity and safety and understandability and usability for the bicyclists, we need to have a transition point that makes sense for users and is safe from the existing facility that's on the street today to a future two-way protected facility that will be implemented with these intersection designs. So the proposal is a total of 4 blocks, and it connects on the north to the existing Hiawatha light rail bicycle trail that has high bicycle counts on the north side, to the south side where we will be picking up with a project that we have called the South Side Greenway. So it provides a continuity, a safe design, and a logical transition point from those existing bi-directional bike lanes to the two-way protected facility that's going to be implemented with those intersections. So that's why we have that red line extension, is that we can't have a design where bicyclists get up to that intersection and they're not in a two-way protected bikeway. They have to figure out how to transition through the intersection and get into that new design. We needed to find that logical transition point for them that would also be safe. So I just wanted to provide that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jenny. Elaine?
Let's see. I mean, notes so I don't forget what I was going to say. What I wanted to add is our previous scope changes that were similar to this when the elements were removed and done with another project. Primarily, the elements already had been completed with another project in full, or were programmed within the next year or two. And in my mind, programmed had always meant programmed in the tip. So yeah, we do need to clarify that. Second was, I had a lot of comments similar to Lissa, that we have approved scope changes where we've added elements to something that was in there. So those blue circles were already existing project elements, and that's where I was willing to support number 2 because those were already in the scope. The last part I wanted to say was, in the application that was submitted, they indicated that their intersections were connecting to existing bike lanes that already had updated plans in place to be constructed. So the way I'm seeing this is, now instead of having it done with another project, they're being added to this project, and maybe they can so yeah, while the improvements, I would say yes, they're good, they were already to be done when these were done as a separate project. Maybe you can respond to that.
Yeah, Jenny or Kathleen, would you like to respond to that?
Sure, Chair. Thank you. Elaine, I think you're speaking to the line that says each intersection includes an existing bike lane planned to be upgraded to a protected bikeway.
Yes.
So this corridor was in our plan, our transportation action plan, as a all ages and abilities network. This was not programmed it didn't have a project yet identified, but it is a plan. And so our all ages and ability network, our street design guide for this type of corridor, says the most compatible design solution would be a protected bikeway. So that is what that refers to. So it was identified on that network. So that is the plan, is to upgrade these.
So I'm thinking maybe in our future responses, we may need to ask our applicants to identify programmed versus something that's planned. And if we are giving them points for something that we expect is actually going to be in place, and that's another topic of discussion.
Okay, thanks, Elaine. Next up, we got Lyndon.
Yeah, to Jenny's point on the design, I totally agree. The design is sound. That, to me, is not the point here. I think approving the scope change allows the project to go forward with the best design. However, I don't think you should get federal funds for that extra work. That's what it comes down to. As far as removing the other two intersections, yeah, that's not ideal because, that's what you asked for. However, you are taking a reduction in money to do that. And my understanding is every project in this category was funded anyway. So you probably would have got the funds for the smaller job or smaller at the time job anyway. But to the red, I agree, the design's good. You shouldn't get federal funds for that extra work done.
Okay. Thank you, Lyndon. Joe? Mr. Barbeau?
Thanks, Chair. Lyndon just made 75% of my point, which was to remind folks that in those options that we provided, they all include approving the scope change in terms of what's going to be put on the ground. As Lyndon pointed out, every project was funded, so we didn't really have to consider whether or not to disallow what's happening at the intersections. And then further with the bike lane, if folks, and the way I've heard people talk about it, I want to clarify that those options include allowing this to happen even if it's only funded locally. If you actually denied that, they could come back and say, can we add this locally? And we would do that administratively. So this is entirely a question of funding. I just want to make sure, well, at least that's how those options are written and how I want to make sure people understand that I believe that's what you're talking about. And anybody disagrees with that, you would want to expand on that.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Mackenzie, I saw your hand go up real quick and go back down. Did Joe scare you, or do you have a question?
No, sorry. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a statement with regard to all of the discussion that's been happening here and the proposal proposal at hand with this item, and just wanted to express support for I think for the third option that would incorporate everything that's been discussed here today and presented by city staff. From the pedestrian perspective, I think that there are pedestrian improvements to be had with the inclusion of the improvements to the bikeway because there is a consistency in interaction with that roadway and space for people walking as well, especially when it comes to folks who might be blind or low vision in navigating these spaces, and having that consistency is an important consideration for them as well. And within that framing and everything else that I've heard today for the justification for this, just wanted to point that out and express support.
Okay, thank you, Mackenzie. Jim, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just want to kind of follow up on that comment and kind of put that in perspective of if the project was, let's say, for instance, doing intersection redesign at two intersections, and let's say there was, turn lanes warranted or what have you, and those tie-ins were made in the street in between or the approach street outside of the kind of the original intersection scope. I don't know how the committee would consider that, and maybe that's a point as well, is that we're really trying to make the project is really trying to make some connections to other improvements, and so I think that's a consideration here.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Elaine.
I had a question for Minneapolis. If this were approved as a scope change for the added elements, but not the funding for the trail portion, would Minneapolis continue to do that and fund it locally, or will they be coming in for a scope change to remove that local portion?
Yeah, Kathleen or Jen?
Kathleen, if it's okay, I can try and answer that one. So thank you, Mr. Chair and Elaine. This portion of the bikeway is important to making the designs of these new intersections work. That's the point we're trying to make, is that the redesign of these intersections with the protected two-way bikeway don't work unless we have the bikeway connections north and south of there. That's a safety for users factor. So we will build this. We're hoping to be able to use as much of the federal funds as possible to do that, because again, that design of those intersections doesn't work without this full stretch and these logical and safe transition points for the bicycle users, which, to Mackenzie's point, which I appreciate, also contribute to pedestrian safety at the intersections and along these blocks.
Thank you, Jen. Elaine, does that answer your question?
Yes, so I interpret that to mean, yes, they'll fund it with the local funds if it's approved.
Yep, it's my understanding as well.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got, I see no more hands up. We've had a lot of good conversation here. I think I've heard about the merits of the project and the proposal here. So would anyone like to make a motion on this? Again, there's three options in front of us. Funding and Programming had proposed and voted on number 3, which would be essentially the reduction. Joe, can you scroll up again? I'm going to make sure I don't screw this up when I say this. It's a reduction of the 2 intersections that were removed, but then adding in the scope change at the intersections, as well as the additional work for that two-way bike lane modification to work with the signals. So that's what came out of Funding and Programming. So I guess the floor is open here if someone would like to make a motion on any 3 of those.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Lyndon here. I'd like to make a motion to approve the scope change, but with funding option 2.
Okay, so that would be essentially approving the scope change, which would include the reduction of the 2 intersections that were, you know, let's just call it 90% modified with Hennepin County's recent project in 2024, but there's still safety work to do there. So the money would come away from those 2 intersections, but we would add in a little more for the scope change or the cost change that was implemented for the 2 remaining intersections on 11th there due to some changes during the continued design process, but it would not include the additional curbing that would be put on along the remainder of the corridor or shown in red in this application. So
that is correct.
All right, thank you, Lyndon. With that, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, Rogers.
Okay, thank you, Rogers. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Not seeing any. All in favor signify by saying aye by roll call. Joe? Mr. Barbeau?
Not getting used to unmuting just yet. McPherson.
Aye.
Robjan.
Aye.
Laborie.
Aye.
Ellos.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Jessen.
Aye.
Leitner.
Dahlheimer for Leitner, aye.
Sorry about that. Mathis.
Aye.
Ellis.
Aye.
Lucher.
I'm going to vote no and just support the funding and programming decision.
Howley. Oh, Howley, you might have left early.
I think he left.
I think he did.
Yeah,
Yep, he
you.
left.
Sorry about that. Hartzell.
Aye.
Omi.
Aye.
Thompson.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Mayel.
Aye.
Nick Peterson.
Aye.
Harrington. Harrington.
He left. He left as well.
Sorry. Thanks for checking the chat for me. Fighton.
Aye.
Spooner Walsh.
Aye.
Turner Bargan.
Aye.
Eddie.
Aye.
Reef.
Aye.
Hunkus.
Aye.
McCartney.
Aye.
Dickerson.
Aye.
Peterson Steve.
Aye.
And Kotsukos.
Aye.
Chair, that's 25 ayes, 1 nay, and no abstentions.
All right, thank you, Joe. Thanks everyone for the thoughtful discussion on that item. That item is approved. And again, that was option 2 in there. Next, I think that closes out our funding and programming, but Chair Kosucher, is there anything else you'd like to add on behalf of the committee?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the time.
All right, thank you, Jim. Next, we'll move into our information item. So we have a presentation here from Kyle, I believe, with the ABRT plan update. So Kyle, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee members. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for having me here today. As mentioned, I'm here to share an information item sharing the recommendations that Metro Transit has for the outcomes of our arterial BRT plan update, where we're working to identify the next arterial BRT lines for implementation between the 2030 and 2035 timeframe. So we've been at TAB a number of times throughout the year. And at the tax transit planning working group a number of times throughout the year as well. This is our first time at the TAB TAC, and next week we'll be going to TAC planning as well to kind of share these outcomes. And then we'll be back at TAB again at the full TAB committee on, let's see, Wednesday the 18th, sharing that as well. So what we'll talk about here today is a little bit of our process recap that we've been undertaking over the course of this year to get to the point of where we're at, sharing the outcomes of our fourth step here, which is really prioritizing, so identifying those next 3 lines for implementation, and then talking about next steps from where we're at right now. Before I get too far into the weeds here, for folks who are not familiar with arterial BRT, just a really quick recap. Arterial BRT is really an upgrade of Metro Transit's highest ridership, highest frequency kind of urban core arterial local routes. And it really lands within sort of the real ridership-oriented side of the spectrum of tools that Metro Transit has available to us to sort of meet our transit needs within Metro Transit's service area. So those tools available to us do kind of range on that coverage to ridership spectrum, where coverage is really more about serving a particular geographic area with some base level of transit service, and really demand responsive service like Metro Micro is sort of emblematic of that type of service, where it's really about basic coverage to a particular geographic area. Arterial BRT is all the way on the other side of that spectrum towards the ridership side, where our goal is really to provide as much service and as many trips as conveniently and quickly as possible for as many people as possible. And we do that by typically serving, denser urban corridors with this style of service. TPP guidance reflects that basic purpose, where we're expected to provide 25 passengers per in-service hour or more on this style of service, arterial BRT. That's the highest productivity guidance of kind of fixed route bus-based transit service. And then we're guided to stick towards market areas 1 and 2 for this style of service. So this is sort of our areas of highest anticipated ridership within the region. Folks are obviously familiar with this, but we have 8 lines planned to be open, 8 arterial BRT lines planned to be open by 2030, A line through H line. A line through E line are open right now as of December of this year, and then F line, G line, and H line are in various stages of planning and engineering to be open before 2030. Our goal here with our plan update has really been to update to identify those next 3 lines, so the J line, K line, and L line. As I mentioned, that would open between 2030 and 2035. And then our intent is to submit the J line corridor, the corridor identified as the J line, to the 2026 regional solicitation process. We've been taking a 4-step plan update process throughout the course of this year, where we started earlier this year with a wide pool. We identified a large pool of kind of candidate corridors for consideration, and have been narrowing our way down up to this point through there. So this summer, we screened down that wide set of candidate corridors to a narrower set of candidates that are sort of those most promising corridors. Earlier this fall, we completed a detailed kind of technical evaluation of those corridors, ranking them by that technical evaluation score, sort of representing which are the corridors, absent other considerations, are sort of the highest ranking corridors on that technical basis. And then finally, we've just completed this prioritization step where from those evaluation results, we reviewed each corridor for their readiness and kind of ability to coordinate with roadway projects, and selected those next lines from that set. So this is where we started earlier this spring. These are the 17 candidate corridors identified for consideration. These are really drawn from existing and planned high frequency local routes, corridors already have been previously studied for arterial BRT or were in the 2040 Transportation Policy Plan, and other corridors identified by our local city and county partners of interest that we were requested to study through here. We applied a set of kind of screening criteria to help us narrow down these corridors to a smaller set to do a little bit more detailed evaluation on. And these are those 11 corridors that we identified for evaluation, kind of narrowing through, these corridors were, again, sort of the most promising corridors we looked at for consideration for arterial BRT. And they're overlaid with those transit market areas. So the dark blue and lighter blue areas are the areas where we expect the highest transit ridership in our region. This fall, we completed those technical evaluation results. So we have had 4 primary goals throughout this work that tie back to kind of how arterial BRT is used in our transit network, and then the guidance we receive from the Transportation Policy Plan. Those are really around kind of increasing ridership, increasing equity, managing costs, and ensuring kind of efficient delivery of our service, and then aligning transit investments with kind of transit supportive land uses. And you can see those scores reflected here. So each corridor could receive up to 100 points. Each goal contributed up to 25 points. You can see these results here showing kind of those top 3 corridors. Nicollet, the Franklin Grand 3rd Street corridor, and West 7th Street corridor are sort of those higher scoring corridors, and then stepping down from there in approximately equal chunks here on those overall total points. So our step here that we recently completed was that prioritization step, where we are starting from those evaluation results, starting from, these are what we would do on each of these corridors, from a purely technical evaluation basis. But understanding that, readiness and feasibility of these corridors is an important part of the evaluation and selection process that doesn't always show up on those technical evaluation results. We have this prioritization step where we're identifying kind of potential questions and readiness considerations from community and rider feedback, as well as from conversations with our local partners, and kind of asking ourselves readiness questions about each of these corridors and kind of trying to align timing on roadway projects to deliver these projects efficiently. So kind of passing through those considerations, each of those 11 corridors, kind of starting from the top, working our way down, saying, is there a reason not to advance this corridor at this time? If so, we sort of hold off on that corridor. If not, we kind of pass through there. And so those readiness considerations have really been asking ourselves kind of 3 questions. Really, how compatible is the existing and future roadway with arterial BRT infrastructure and service? So we have kind of specific dimensions and kind of specific, design elements that need to kind of fit within the overall roadway and the right-of-way to implement arterial BRT effectively. So really asking ourselves, are we able to do that with existing and planned roadway conditions on those alignments? How well does each corridor fit within the existing and planned transit network? So here we're trying to think about not just the individual corridor, but the broader picture. So how well are we serving the entire Metro Transit's, service area that we represent? Or are we, making sure that we're balancing Metro investment? And then are there major unanswered questions about the alignment itself? So this kind of either questions that might have come up through the engagement we have done throughout the course of the year, or conversations with our other local partners, or internal conversations as well. And then with those readiness questions, we are also kind of asking ourselves about timing, and particularly timing of future roadway projects. So we ideally want to be aligning these investments, so J line, K line, L line, with any roadway projects that are planned on those corridors, so that we are not coming back in and doing additional work after a roadway project, kind of changing things that might have been federally funded, doing multiple seasons of construction in the same area next to each other, just kind of trying to deliver these projects more efficiently. So asking ourselves those questions gets us to these recommendations, and I'll walk through kind of corridor by corridor, sort of what was considered under each of these corridors. But at a high level, and Elaine previewed this with Chair Barber's Transportation Committee update earlier, but recommendation of the J line being the West 7th Street corridor, the K line being the Nicollet Avenue corridor, and then some additional work that we need to do before identifying the L line, where we need to answer some key questions about that other corridor that kind of scored within the top three, the Franklin Grand 3rd Street corridor, before we're able to advance a particular corridor. So following completion of study on that corridor, we would then recommend an L line from one of those three candidate corridors. Separately, we are going to take two parts of two corridors we also considered here and include them in the feasibility study of the Metro C line, which operates today on Penn Avenue and Olson Memorial Highway and in downtown Minneapolis, potentially looking to extend those out from Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park and then down along Cedar Avenue. So these are those recommendations at a glance, starting with the J line and the K line. So you can see, and again, these are two of the top three scoring corridors. And really the basis of those recommendations, there's no major outstanding questions about either of these two corridors when it comes to alignment, termini, or network structure. There are significant opportunities, particularly with respect to the J line on West 7th, to advance this in alignment with the MnDOT-led project on West 7th, and obviously we've been working closely with St. Paul and Ramsey County and MnDOT and others on that work already. And then we're ongoing coordination with the city of Minneapolis on the Nicollet Mall kind of question of what the Nicollet BRT corridor would look like in downtown Minneapolis is still a need for sure. So then circling back to the corridors not recommended to advance at this time, and then I'll come back to the candidates for L line. I'll go through these one by one at a fairly high level, starting with the Payne-Westminster corridor in St. Paul. This corridor is based on a pretty significant restructuring of a local route, Route 64, which is identified in Network Now, and it's a change that Metro Transit is excited about, and I think will add a lot of value in this area. But it's untested at this point. And so there's some hesitation to name this as an L line, as a arterial BRT corridor prior to doing this change on a local route. So our recommendation is to implement those plan changes and continue to monitor this corridor for performance rather than name it as an arterial BRT line at this time. And you can see here those plan changes included in Network Now that are upcoming. Bloomington-Lyndale North corridor really is the question is about kind of fit within the overall metro network. Lyndale Avenue North on the north side here in Minneapolis is very close to the existing D line. It's within 1/3 of a mile, and that's so close that that's really kind of competing with the D line as opposed to complementing the D line. And so we're recommending not advancing arterial BRT on the north end on Lyndale Avenue at this point. On Bloomington Avenue, the southern portion of this corridor, this is a good candidate for consideration, either Bloomington Avenue or Cedar Avenue in this area for a C-line extension study. And so our recommendation here is to move the Bloomington Avenue segment of this corridor into that upcoming study. And kind of assess whether Bloomington or Cedar Avenue should be advanced as a potential C-line extension. 63rd Avenue and Zane in Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center. This is based on the Route 724. This is a very short corridor as a standalone corridor. And we've seen some trouble kind of getting accruing some of the speed and reliability arterial BRT benefit on such a short corridor. And so our recommendation here is to consider this as part of the C line extension as well on the north side, and to see if we can't make this corridor work a little bit better as a potential C line extension rather than as a standalone corridor. So that's our recommendation there, is to consider both C line extensions on both the north end and the south end of the C line. Broadway corridor is kind of getting down the ranking in terms of technical evaluation, technical score. In addition, we are seeing here some lower ridership and productivity than we would like to see forecasted for arterial BRT, where that productivity is really below our regional guidelines of 25 passengers per in-service hour. Further, we have some pretty significant unresolved questions about the alignment of this corridor, both in terms of termini location and sort of path through the mid-city industrial area and quarry shopping center area, excuse me. And our recommendation here is to explore local route adjustments before doing anything related to arterial BRT. 66th Street, again, is on the lower side of the technical evaluation results. It is a very short corridor, again, sort of limiting that potential benefit for arterial BRT, and has lower forecast ridership than we'd like to see as well. So our recommendation here is to continue monitoring the local service on this corridor, which is the Route 515, already a high frequency local bus route. And finally, of the corridors not recommending to advance, Lowry Avenue, where we have the lowest technical score of the 11 corridors we studied. Again, forecast ridership here on this corridor is relatively low. We have a sort of a gap in existing levels of service. So the Route 32 runs every 20 to 30 minutes today. It's planned to run every 20 minutes in network now, and there's potential for increased frequency on that local route as well, prior to anything having to do with arterial BRT in this corridor. So our recommendation is to implement those planned improvements and kind of continue to develop that additional market for transit service in this area. Finally, circling back up to the candidates that are remaining for consideration for the Metro L line. So I'll start with Franklin Grand Third, and this is a complicated corridor. It's a very high scoring corridor from our technical evaluation results. So in those top three, but there are some unresolved questions about potential arterial BRT alignment and compatibility with Franklin Avenue in particular. And we want to answer those questions before saying, yes, this is a corridor we want to advance for arterial BRT at this time. So questions about how well arterial BRT would actually fit on the existing and planned roadway improvements on Franklin Avenue led by Hennepin County. Questions about how to actually get this corridor across the Mississippi River. And then questions on the east side as well, whether to use 3rd Street or possibly consider 7th Street, which might be a little bit more of a balance between the bronze line and the existing gold line at this point. So our recommendation is to complete a corridor study over the next year, which will answer those key questions and potentially make changes to this corridor prior to considering it as a potential candidate for the L line. Moving on to the next candidate corridor for the L line, the Johnson-Lyndale corridor. This is, again, a corridor that's scoring kind of in the middle of the pack from the technical evaluation results. Kind of a key consideration here is its proximity to the existing and planned metro network. So this corridor is about a half a mile from either existing or planned metro arterial BRT lines on both sides. So on the north end, it's close to the F line on Central Avenue. On the south end, it's close to Hennepin Avenue and to the upcoming K line on Nicollet Avenue. And that is close enough to say, you know, that's not a reason not to do this corridor ever, but it's a question, it's a reason for us to ask ourselves, is this the right next corridor given the other investments that are occurring in this general area? And finally, Randolph East 7th Street is the other candidate for consideration for the L line. This is on the lower side of the technical evaluation results, but has a similar kind of consideration to the Johnson-Lyndale corridor, where there's, in this case, considerable overlap with a planned J line on West 7th Street. And and questions about that and how it might relate to the study of the Franklin Grand Third Street corridor. So taking a quick step back and kind of looking at all these corridors and their recommendations in the context of kind of current local average daily ridership on the local bus routes in these corridors, you can see, by and large, the higher ridership corridors are the ones that are being considered for some type of either recommendation as the J line or the K line, or future consideration for arterial BRT in some form through here. Taking a slightly different look at similar data here, looking at forecasted passengers per in-service hour. So we did some ridership projections on these corridors. These are those same corridors shown with anticipated passengers per in-service hour. And you can see that yellow line is our regional guidance, 25 passengers per in-service hour or more. And the corridors that we're looking at in some capacity in the future are really a bit beyond that guidance, or sort of right at that metric. And the corridors that we're not recommending to advance are sort of below that metric at this point. So just recapping our next steps here, we are at this point recommending a J line and a K line. So J line West 7th Street, K line Nicollet Avenue. We will next year be completing that detailed corridor study of the Franklin Grand Third Street corridor. Following that study, we'll be recommending an L line from one of 3 candidate corridors for the L line, either that corridor study result, or the Johnson-Lyndale corridor, or the Randolph East 7th corridor. We'll also be on a separate path completing the feasibility study of the C line extensions, both on the north end and on the south end. And that will be also over the next year. Upcoming actions for us. So as I mentioned, we'll be up at TAC planning next week, and then at TAB the following week. We'll also be at council at the end of February, bringing forward a business item recommending the J line and the K line for council consideration for adoption. Later this spring, we'll be submitting the J line for the 2026 regional solicitation, and working to amend the 2050 transportation policy plan to include the J line and the K line. And then following that, we'll be initiating that study, Franklin Grand Third. And then later this year in 2026, we'll be recommending the L line following the completion of that study. And with that kind of speedy overview, I can pause for questions.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Yeah, anybody have questions? A lot of detail there. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, Kyle, thanks for the presentation. Well done, and kind of a thorough process to select. Just curious about, with all that being said, are there construction projections or in-service projections, out there? Are we talking about J line in 2033 or approximately?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sorry, Chair, committee members, great question. The timing right now for these is still approximate, but yeah, so we're aiming for basically the early part of that 5-year horizon for J line, kind of the middle part for K line, and then the latter part for L line. So like a 2031, 2033, 2035 approximate distribution.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just thanks for that, Kyle. Very informative. Appreciate it. Just general question, just out of curiosity about ABRT in particular. I know that it's generally targeting high ridership routes and corridors to add capital infrastructure and service improvements. Is there a general sense of just like the percentage increase of essentially cost for an ABRT over the already existing service? I know it's kind of a rough estimate I'm asking for, but just curious if there's kind of a guidance or kind of a general sense at Metro Transit.
Chair, committee members, sorry, a clarifying question. Do you mean operating cost?
Yeah, I'd say primarily operating costs, and we kind of get a sense of the capital cost, I suppose, for the project. So yeah, more primarily operating costs.
Sure. Yeah, so on the capital side, obviously it depends on the corridors, but these are on the average of, $100-ish million, $120 million, something like that, depending on the corridor and depending on how well we can coordinate with a roadway project. On the operating side, it also kind of depends on the corridor. So many of these, many of our corridors, we are, going from sort of 15-minute service on the local route to, 10 to 15-minute service on the arterial BRT route. So the order of magnitude is actually a little bit lower for arterial BRT in terms of just new operating costs than it might be from a corridor that was, a totally new transit in a particular area. So, order of magnitude, we're talking about something like depending on the corridor, maybe a 10 to 20% increase in operating cost. But again, very round numbers, yeah.
Of course, no, I appreciate that and I totally understand it's very raw at that point, but I appreciate the answer. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Kyle, thanks for being here today. A lot of information. Appreciate that. Yeah. All right. So that sums up our information items for today. Does anyone have any additional business or items worthy of the conversation here at the committee? All right, not seeing any. I didn't keep to the 10 a.m., but we got through a lot of material today. So appreciate everyone's time today. We will consider the meeting adjourned. Have a great Wednesday. Thank you.